I'm sure all of you are aware of the word poem, and you know the examples of a poem in, if not in English language, I'm sure in Urdu language or in any other regional language. So the word poem is not new for anybody. Okay, so we know what a poem is. We also discussed in this course what are the characteristics of poetry, right? So based upon that, we know what a poem is. Okay, so today we are going to learn how to read a poem. Okay, so basically the ultimate output of the reading practice, the ultimate output of reading a poem is to be able to write its analysis, right? And that is an important goal of this course. In the long run, you should be able to produce a written analysis of various literary texts, including a poem. That is why the title of today's presentation is Writing a Close Analysis of a Poem. And you will be required to write an analysis, close analysis of a poem later on. So here are a few steps involved in the process of being able to write the analysis. So to write an analysis is the ultimate end, right? But the act of writing begins from reading. So the first step in that is talking with the text. So you read, and reread. You identify literary elements in that particular poem. By now, we know that a literary text is recognized because of the literary elements present in that. So, as you know, there are literary elements in poetry, there are literary elements in narrative fiction, there are literary elements in a drama or a play. The literary elements in a poem are like this. They could be rhyme, they could be meter, they could be form, like elegy is a form of poetry, lyric is a form of poetry, and ode is a form of poetry. Each one of them have their own special content. For example, elegy is a poem which basically describes the mourning, right? The mourning over the death of somebody. Elegy is usually written to commemorate a person who has passed away. Lyric, on the other hand, is usually a love poem. It's full of music. It appreciates beauty. It also appreciates beauty in its different forms. Ode is a little more reflective. You know, there is a thoughtful process involved in an ode. So the reading for this particular topic, which I will share with you, that describes these terms in more detail, right? So it's useful to know which form stands for what. And so you identify the literary elements. You identify what kind of rhyme is there, what kind of meter is there, what is the form of that particular poem. Literary elements. You identify kind of. Okay. So this is the second step. Now there are other elements of a poem as well. You know, for example, in poetry you find lot of symbols. The symbols are the word or are the things in a poem which stand for something else. For example, fog, F-O-G, fog. It could be a symbol for melancholy, for sadness. Sun, S-U-N, sun, could be a symbol for life. There are not many symbols in poetry. Metaphors. literary elements in poetry. Uh, we find many literary elements in poetry. So identify the literary elements when you are reading a poem. Okay. There are similes as well. So this is the second step, identifying literary elements. The third step in the process of reading a poem is analyze the effects that that poem is making on you. So poems do have certain effects on the readers. The sad poems make you sad. The happy poems make you happy. I mean, that is the basic thing. But then there are some poems which are full of patriotism and love for country. When you read them, you feel patriotic, right? You have that feeling of patriotism, love for your country. There could be some moral poems. There's morality in them. You read them and you feel like adopting that particular moral which is in the poem, right? So analyze the effects. Now, each one of you, when you read a poem, might experience a different effect, which is fine. This is how poetry works. A same poem affects different readers in a different way. So analyze what are the effects. You're not yet writing anything, okay? You are doing all this mental exercise while reading the text. You are talking with the text, right? You are reading it and you are telling yourself, based upon what you are reading, what kind of form it has, what kind of literary elements it has, what kind of rhyme is there, what kind of meter is there, what are the symbols, what are the metaphors, what are the similes, like that. You also keep telling yourself, what effect does the poem have on you? Does it have an aesthetic effect on you? Does it have a patriotic effect on you? Does it have a moralistic effect on you? Like that. And then after having read the poem, you think aloud. You pose questions about something that confuses you or about a possible interpretation. So when you read a poem, you might come across some parts of it which are unclear to you. If that is the case, you should think about those parts and reflect what is the confusion in those parts and what answer do you have about the parts which confuse you. Similarly, think about the possible interpretation of any part of a poem. What is an interpretation? Interpretation is a general meaning that you can draw out of a poem. Okay, so if you can draw a general meaning out of it, think about that too. Then identify familiar, unfamiliar vocabulary or allusions. Then you might feel here and there that there are some words which are new to you. There are some allusions. What are allusions? Does anybody have any idea about allusion? What is an allusion? Did you ever hear this word previously somewhere? Anybody? An allusion. What is an allusion?
Sir,
Yeah.
Um, s- sir, it is an expression that is designed to call something to mind without like
Okay.
mentioning it. It's an indirect reference, you can say.
Okay. All right. Heather, you wanted to say something?
sir, something you are not sure of, um, an experience or an image,
Yeah. Yeah.
like a deja vu, something like you might have seen it or experienced it, but you're not sure what is it.
Oh, okay. I think little bit of what you are saying is correct, definitely. So basically, the word allusion comes from the word allude, ALLUDE, and to allude means to refer to something. Okay, to refer to something in a particular text. Okay, so there could, while you are reading a poem, there could be passing references to various things, various historical anecdotes, historical events. Okay, so the poem cannot describe the whole of the event, but just from that one small word, you know what is the reference to. Okay, for example, uh, we use the word 9/11, 9 oblique 11, right? So the if we are reading a text and the word 9/11 has been used, we know 9/11 is just a date, right? But this expression, mathematical expression 9/11, is an allusion to a historical event, right? So as soon as we come across this kind of illusion, immediately we are able to draw connection between that word and the whole historical event, which has not been described in the poem as such, but only has been referred to. Okay. Now, if we are not aware of certain historical context while we are reading a poem, and we are not aware of certain historical context, then we might not be able to understand the illusion immediately, right? So 9/11 is very fresh in our memories. But if somebody after 100 years reads a poem and finds this word 9/11 over there, might not right away know what is this. Okay, so then that person might have to look up a dictionary or ask an expert what is this 9/11 over here, right? So words like that, they are allusion to something else, which is outside the poem and has not been described in the poem. So when we read a poem, there could be unfamiliar vocabulary, there could be unfamiliar allusions as well, right? Especially when we read European poetry and English poetry, there are a lot many allusions to the history of the British history, the history of Britain, or there might be lot many allusions to Greek culture and Greek civilization, because European and British literature has been heavily influenced by Greek culture, right? So there are a lot many mythologies in Greece, okay, in Greek culture, and the poet might choose just one word to allude to that whole mythology, right? If we are not aware of that mythology, then that allusion will not make any sense to us, right? So 1857, right? The War of Independence in the subcontinent, that could be used as an allusion, right? If you haven't read history, you might not know what this allusion stands for, right?
Sir, we
So
are talking
also
about.
notes,
Excuse me, sir. Sir,
yeah,
Sir, we are talking about illusions like with an A, right? Because I think some people in the chat are
yes,
confused,
yes,
like
yes,
confusing it with
yeah.
illusions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that is why I said that it is from the word allude. Okay, so the word that starts with I it does not have a verb, right? The word I illusion does not have a verb, but the word illusion does have a verb, which is allude, right? So to allude to means to point towards something or to refer to something. Okay, so note specific stylistic elements and their effect. Now there could be certain stylistic elements in a poem as well. For example, the lines might have been written in a particular manner. There could be a certain pattern of sounds in lines. If that is the case, notice those stylistic elements and what effect do they produce. Rephrase inverted lines. In poetry, it is a very common practice to write the lines in inverted manner. I will show you an example, uh, on slide 5, how sometimes inverted lines are written as well. If you find an inverted line, then rephrase it for yourself to understand what it exactly means. Then make connections within the poem, noting any repetitions, patterns, or contrasts. Now, these are the strategies to read a poem. There are 3 steps to it. Reading 1. In the first reading, just understand the content of the poem. What is it saying at its face value? Reading 2, which is the second reading of the same poem. connect with broader themes and ideas. So, what themes do you draw out of that particular poem? Or what ideas come to your mind when you are reading this poem? So, see the difference between these two levels of reading. In the first level, you are only trying to understand the real content. What do the words mean? What do the allusions mean? Things like that. But at second level, now you are concerned with the broader themes or ideas in the poem. And then at the third level, in reading three, write your observations as sentences. So, uh, in first two readings, basically what you do is you write annotation. Annotation is this, that you have the text of the poem in front of you. You should use a pencil and you know a, a pencil color or colored marker or colored pencils to write down what do you understand from the poem in word form, in notes form. And then in reading two, once again, write the broader themes in the margin of the poem, the themes that come to your mind. And then at reading three level, write complete sentences, maybe on a separate sheet. Okay. Now here is, a little clear example of how it works. So here is a poem. It is a sonnet, Sonnet 29 by William Shakespeare, right? Now somebody has done reading one. So notice how that reading one has been done. So whatever you see over here in terms of all these, marks, this all together is called annotation. All right. So all this together is called annotation. Now, for example, when somebody reads the first line, when in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state. So the word fortune is a personification. And trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries. Now, read the word bootless and you realize you don't know the meaning of the word. You write in the note, look it up. Deaf heaven is a personification again. And look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art. So the word art has multiple meanings, and that man's scope, odd use of this word. Now all these expressions in the margins, they are the notes for one particular reader. When you read the similar poem, you might have different notes. You might already understand the words which are not familiar to the reader who wrote this annotation on this page that you can see on your screen. So look at this word, for example, happily I think on thee, and then my state like to the lark at break of day arising. Right? So sounds like happily, right? Probably it is happily, okay? From sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate. But thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Right. So when you read these two last lines, you might not be aware of the meaning of the word scorn. Right. If that is the case, you can similarly draw a line right over here. Look up the meaning. Okay. So this is the first level of reading where you are not sure about some words. You are sure, yes, you are sure about some words. The ones you are sure about, write their meanings like that. The ones you are not, look up the meaning and then write them. Okay. So this is the reading one level. Now, I also want to explain another thing with reference to, we can take, in fact, quite a number of lines from here, but let me take these two last lines to explain the point of inverted sentences or inverted lines. Okay. So if you see this line, for thy sweet love remembered, such wealth brings. Right. So basically, this is a kind of love sonnet, right? It is a love sonnet, and the poet over here states or wishes to state that when I remember your sweet love, that brings wealth to me, that brings such wealth to me, that then I scorn to change my state with kings, that I will not be happy then to exchange my state of mind with the state of mind of the kings, right? So this is what these two lines mean. But if you pay attention to this first line over here, this one, you might notice that the sentence seems to have been written in an inverted manner. What should come first in the line is coming at the end in the line, right? So look at it. For thy sweet love remembered, such wealth brings. It should be other way around. It should be like this, that when I remember your love, or remembering your sweet love brings to me, bring should come over here, brings to me such wealth. So the word bring should be after the subject. Subject over here is thy sweet love, right? So when I remember, when I remember, thy means your, when I remember your sweet love, it brings to me such wealth, right? So what you notice over here is, if not exactly inverted, the order of the words in the sentence is not the normal order of the words in a sentence when we speak to somebody in day to day life, right? Why the poet has done that? Because this is poetic language, right? In the poetic language, the poet has to maintain a certain order of feet. Okay, you might recall our discussion about the meter and rhyme. So the poet wants to maintain a rhyme between the word brings and kings, right? Right? These two words rhyme with each other. In order to maintain that rhyme, the poet puts this word at the end, puts the word brings at the end instead of putting it at its right place. All right. So a lot of it happens in poetry. So you need to paraphrase. Paraphrase means simplify the sentence line for yourself to understand it better. Okay. Anyways, so this is the first reading level, and I explained to you about inverted line as well. Let's move on to the reading two level. Now, if we look at the reading two, that is about themes, right? And ideas which come to your mind when you read a particular poem. So when you read this particular poem, so when you read this particular poem, uh, so students, now look over here. Now, this reader has noticed a contrast, cries versus sings. Over here cries and over here sings. Repeated reference to wealth, but of hope of friends. So possession, for example, friends possessed, and then wealth. Similarly, juxtaposing heaven and earth. Every earthly things, wealth, not as important as love. Okay, so that appears to be a theme in the last four lines of the poem. Now, you might not notice this theme in your first reading, because in your first reading you are paying too much attention just to the difficult words and the new words and any possible allusions. But in the second reading, you might notice these themes. So repetition of state. So is that word has dual meaning? What are those dual meanings? Right? key. They are poor, but they have each other, right? So this is about lover and beloved. They are poor, but they have each other. All right. Therefore, they are in a happy company for each other, right? So this is the second level of the reading. The reader over here also noticed shift in tone. Now over here, the tone seems to be a little desperate, disappointment. Okay, so the word like cries, but over here there is a positive shift, change, a hopeful tone. We observe a hopeful tone towards the end. That even if we do not have enough riches, we still have each other's love. So this is shift in tone. So now this kind of, this second reading, now this all is called annotation. Annotation at the second reading of this text. This all exercise will be different for each of you, for each poem that you read. But this is a productive way to read a poem or to read a literary text. Okay, for the time being, we are discussing poem. Okay, now reading three level. This is now reading three level. In the third level of your reading, you record your understanding of the poem in the form of sentences. If you read these sentences with me right now, students, they say, in this Shakespearean sonnet, the speaker seems miserable at first. He is crying about being an outcast. I'm not sure about those bootless cries. He says he is jealous of people who have it better than he has it. He envies people with hope, with talent, with friends, and with scope. Not sure what that means, but maybe more open-minded. He seems to be he seems to also just wish he had more money. He uses words related to fortune and wealth a few times in the poem, once in the first line, again in line 5, and finally in the second to last line. But the meaning is a little different each time. Something happens around line 9 with the word yet. Just when he hates himself the most, almost despising, he thinks of someone, his beloved, and the whole tone of the poem changes. Suddenly, birds are singing hymns at heaven's gate, and they are larks, morning birds, if I remember from Romeo and Juliet, which suggests they are pretty optimistic. By the last line, the speaker has decided that he wouldn't trade places with the king. It seems as though the speaker is reflecting on how we often get down on ourselves when we are criticized or when things don't go our way. When the speaker is most depressed, he has only to think of how he is loved, and his optimism returns. He no longer wishes to trade places with those who seem more fortunate, like kings, because somebody loves him. Lucky guy. Now, this is not the analysis of a poem. Rather, this is the third level of reading. The third level of reading is that once you have done level 1 and level 2, now you should be able to record your thoughts about that particular poem in a continuous piece of writing like this. Now, this is for your personal use that you are writing this piece. Okay, you are not going to, kind of give it to somebody to publish it, or you're not going to read it publicly. Okay, it is just for yourself. But while you write this way, that helps you to think clearly about the real meaning of that particular poem. So this is therefore a strategy to prepare you to write your analysis of the poem in a better way. So this is just a step towards writing your